In traditional budgeting, we spend a bunch of time once per year and have been a little bit facetious, but have a whole bunch of people in our organization fight over how much money is going to be allocated to their pot, right? And then that's their pot for the year. They know that if they don't spend it, they lose it, right? If you allocate $1 million to a particular project and they only use 500,000, next year you're going to be thinking of giving them 500,000, and it's going to be very hard for them to fight for $1 million, even if that's just the normal ebb and flow of what it is we're working on. And if something doesn't fit within, like we spend such a long time building the budget and balancing it, right? Like one. If you've seen those, the budget that countries have, it's this massive book. We end up with, not obviously as big as that because we don't have as many things, but a big book of here's what the budget is for the year. The problem is that 5 minutes after we've ratified the budget, that we've put our stamp on it and said, yep, that's our budget for the year, the market changes. The state of the product changes. Ideas change. So if somebody comes up with an idea, it's not in the budget for this year, right? But the market opportunity is in a couple of weeks. We have enough time to build it, but we don't have any budget, right? That's maybe small enough that there's discretionary funding, but let's say it was 6 months worth of work. So it's massive effort, massive endeavor, but huge payoffs, then we'd probably do something, right? But where's that balance in your organization, that level, the scale of the payoff versus the cost the money we have to go find? Where's that biting point? And how much do we lose? How much value in the market do we lose because lots of things just don't quite hit that biting point because we're doing yearly budgets? So there's a bunch of things around beyond budgeting, which is how we do budgets in order to be more effective. But effectively, the result that you want for your organization is that you can fund the things that make sense at the time they make sense, right? So in the Agile world, we're getting working product in front of our customers as frequently as we can, right? So depending on what it is you're building, that time scale might change. But I think the Agile Manifesto says from a few weeks to a few months, right? Scrum talks about 30 days. 30 days is the maximum amount of time between getting things in front of your customers. And if you look at the Detecting Agile BS paper from the US Department of Defense, they talk about every iteration, including the first, getting your product in front of real customers. So not to UAT, not to just merely test users, but to real production users. So you're going to production every iteration. If you're doing that, if you're getting to production every iteration, then that's your pivot point, right? It's not a yearly pivot point figuring out what we're going to do, but it's a much smaller pivot point. So instead of allocating all the money at a single yearly point, we want to be ebb and flowing as, you know, this project reaches a dead end. There's not much more value to be had. So we're not gonna continue it. We're not going to do more sprints. We're not going to do more iterations at the moment. We're going to move it into maintenance mode, which changes its cost profile. And for other things, there's a new initiative. Some folks have come up with a great idea. Let's fund that. So you're effectively looking at more of a venture capitalist or a entrepreneur style budgeting model, in that you're not allocating all the funding to projects up front. You have a pool of finance available, like how much can we spend? You should know that on a regular basis. What's our capability? And then we want to spend as little as possible to get the maximum value, and that ebb and flow needs to happen. The difficulty in the traditional model is I had a customer recently who are doing big things. It's manufacturing, and they're making big things, big expensive things. And they had a machine that was faulty. And it wasn't faulty. It was just getting old. It was starting to make mistakes. It was creating less effective parts than the product needed. And they kept using it. And the person who ran the machine wrote the business case for getting a new machine and started passing it up the chain. They did all the due diligence they needed to do. And it kept going up in the organization because I think it was a $10 or $20 million spend. Therefore, it had to go fairly high in the organization to get approval. And it got to somebody who looked at it and said, that's not in my budget for this year, no. And that's not in its budget for this year, no, cost the company billions of dollars in recalls to recall the product and resolve the issues that resulted from this machine that could have been replaced for $10 million and it cost billions. So that's why we need to do that. That's an example of why we need to do something different. The bit that you don't see, like that's an obvious one, right? That's a catalyst for change because, oh my goodness me, we just had this huge cost. Why did we have it? Because of this $10 million we didn't spend. Well, let's spend the $10 million. But the bit you don't see is your unrealized value. If you think of an evidence-based management, at the top of the curve in your market value of your product, you've got unrealized value on one side and value on the other. So you've got value that's in your product, your current increment, and then you've got unrealized value, which should be reflected in your backlog, but there's more unrealized value than is actually in your backlog, right? We want to be continually adapting that unrealized value as the market shifts, as opportunities arise, as things change in the world. And it's very difficult to do that within the bounds of a traditional yearly budget cycle. So we need to adapt our yearly budget cycle into the context of we're not doing yearly projects anymore. We're building products, and a product has a budget and they can allocate it however they like. And budgets for products tend to look like number of people, right? Usually the most expensive thing, especially when we're building software, is the people. So this particular product has the budget to support 100 people a year on it. That's their budget cycle. And then within that budget cycle, they're deciding how they allocate it, what features they allocate to within that context. That can be a kind of halfway where your organization might still be doing yearly budgets, but you're able to adapt it to the product cycle. But there's more you can do. Take a look at beyond budget.